this afternoon's event. We're pretty fortunate for a number of reasons. First off, we have a really great supporter of Concordia and the Office School of Business. Of course, Jim Park is here with us, and he has brought our special guest, who is Jim Ziolkowski. And Jim is the CEO of builOn, which is an organization, a nonprofit organization, that, as I'm sure you know by now, has created over 500 schools in a number of different countries, some of them the most poverty-stricken countries in the world. And they also do a bunch of great things in the United States, but I'll let Jim explain a little bit more of that. So, without further ado, Jim.
All right, thank you. So first, I want to thank Jim in Maryland for bringing me out here. I haven't even been here 24 hours, but I love it. And this is such a wonderful campus, and it's such a great opportunity to talk to you all. So I'm just very, very grateful to be here, and very, very grateful, especially for Jim Park, who's been an incredible mentor and has done just a tremendous amount, which we'll talk about later, actually. So the first time I ever heard the word ignition used in a meaningful way was in a very remote African village in the heart of Malawi. And when I heard this guy say ignition the way he said it, it changed the way I thought about the word, and it changed the way I was living my life to an extent. And this is a central theme in the book that you all have, by the way, that Jim Park provided. This is a central theme in the book, and I'm going to expand on it in a few minutes. But first, I want to introduce you to this kid. His name is Jimmy Arzu. And I took this picture of Jimmy on top of a 22-story Section 8 housing project in the South Bronx. And Jimmy lives on the 20th floor of this building. And when you look out from Jimmy's rooftop, what you see is the poorest congressional district in the United States, the South Bronx. Also one of the most dangerous. In fact, in a 6-block space there's 55,000 people living below the U.S. poverty line. And Jimmy's been able to navigate, for most of his life, the challenges of living in that particular neighborhood through his passion for sports. The kid loves to hoop, and he's pretty good at it. And the good news is there's a court right next to his building. The bad news is it's gang turf. So from a very young age, Jimmy's under a lot of pressure to affiliate. And finally, when he turned 14, the two guys running the crew got Jimmy to join. And these aren't the same two guys. One of those guys is in jail for murder, and the other guy got killed, got shot. So it's a very dangerous gang. Jimmy's 14, he's in the gang. When he turns 15, his mother passed away. So he's living in Section 8, he's in a gang, and he's an orphan. Jimmy Arzu finds himself at ground zero for what has become a national crisis in America. Now, more than any other time in history, high school kids are dropping out of school. They're becoming part of the ranks of youth unemployed, they're joining gangs, and they're becoming incarcerated. It is so dramatic and so pronounced that we are losing a student every 26 seconds. We just lost one. Somebody somewhere, statistically, just dropped out of high school in America. So what's going to happen to Jimmy Arzu? Is he going to become a statistic? I don't know. I can't tell you that. We are not a charity. We are not trying to rescue Jimmy Arzu or anyone. What we want to do is empower Jimmy to break the cycle of poverty, illiteracy, and low expectations through service and education. That's it. And we approach our work through these 3 pillars: education, service, building, schools. So we have a service learning curriculum that we employ in classrooms in high schools around the country. And kids study, they map out their neighborhoods, their communities, they look at the deficits and the challenges. They look at ways that they can contribute and turn things around. They learn about issues in developing countries surrounding extreme poverty and illiteracy. They take action by going out and doing service and by building schools. And it has become a movement. We're in 62 high schools in Detroit, Chicago, New York, Philly, San Francisco, Oakland. And kids have united behind service in a massive way. And the work that they're doing is incredible to me. I mean, our kids every week are spending time with elders, going into nursing homes, visiting people that haven't had a visitor for a month or a year, letting them know that somebody cares. They're tutoring little kids in high-risk communities, helping them with their homework. Just spending time with them, letting them know somebody's got their back. Some of our kids are actually working with elders that have developmental disabilities. This picture was taken in Chicago. One of our schools in Chicago, the kids involved in the program all have an IEP. They're all part of the special ed program in their school, Juarez High School on the west side, tough school. And these kids want to serve, and they're reaching out and helping adults, kids with learning disabilities, helping adults with developmental disabilities. I think it's powerful and heroic what our students are doing. They serve meals in soup kitchens. I've seen kids serving meals to folks that are HIV positive and have AIDS. I've seen our kids serving meals to veterans that are homeless. I've seen our kids serving meals in shelters where they themselves have had to get their own meals. And I've seen our kids lifting up younger children. Every Saturday, for instance, in the South Bronx, our kids are working with young children with physical and developmental disabilities. And it adds up. They have contributed more than 1.3 million hours of service. So this is a movement. And this is part of what I'm talking about with the word ignition. These same students have helped us build 618 schools in some of the economically poorest countries on the planet. And I had a chance to go to Malawi, Africa, not too long. I actually go to Malawi fairly frequently, but not too long ago I was with a team of kids to build a school. I'm going to talk about that in a little while, but first I want to go back in time by 20 years and talk about the first school that we built in Africa. This is not the school that we built. This is a school that they had in the village when we arrived, a place called Misomali Village. And they had about 150 kids packed in there, maybe 12 or 15 of them girls. So my brother and I said, well, we can do this, but we're gonna live here and learn from you, the elders, how to unite and come together behind this project, how to build this school. And we'll provide the materials, the resources, whatever we need. But you got to send your daughters to school in equal numbers with your sons. We cannot break the cycle of extreme poverty unless girls and women have access to education. Mothers are the people that lift families out of poverty. Mothers are the ones that lift communities out of poverty. And we also said, you got to help us build it. You got to contribute all the unskilled labor to do it. They agreed. So we got busy digging the foundation. That went fast. This guy was on the work site every day. His name is Stephen Tombani, the most dedicated volunteer. Just completely into it. He became my best friend in that village. He became my mentor in a lot of ways, too. He taught me a lot of things that I never could have otherwise found or learned. So the walls are starting to go up. Things are going pretty well for us. My brother Dave is on the left there. Everything was good until Dave collapsed from malaria and almost died. And 8 days later, I had a 104-degree fever. I had dysentery. I had this fever. I lost consciousness, went into convulsions apparently. And by the grace of God, Dave was able to drag me into one of 2 hospitals that they had in the country at the time. And I later found out I had malaria too. I was out unconscious for a couple of days. And when I came out of it, the doctor walked into my room, and I didn't know where I was. I had all these track marks and bruises going up both arms from needles, and I'm freaking out a little bit because the HIV/AIDS infection rates at that time in Malawi over 35% nationally. And I don't know how this. A doctor walks into my room, and he's like, 2 more hours away from this hospital, and you would have been dead. My veins had already begun to collapse. They could barely get a needle in. They finally did, to rehydrate me and to get the quinine and to address the malaria. So I was lucky. They were there. They saved my life. And I was back on my feet in like 3 days. I was okay. I felt pretty good, all things considered. My brother Dave had a different strain of malaria, and so he had to come back to the States to recover. I decided to go to the village and try and finish building the school. And I'm walking that last 4 or 5 miles or so back into the community. And Dave's not with me this time, so if something happens, I know I'm in a little bit more trouble. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing these community members, and I'm realizing that when they contract malaria, they do not have a near-death experience. They die. Why did I survive and they don't? It's because of extreme poverty. They don't have $20 to go to the hospital. They don't have $2 for a mosquito net. I was overwhelmed by this, and I almost turned around and started walking back the other direction. But then I thought, if we could get the school built, then maybe they could break that cycle of extreme poverty through education, and they don't need people like me to come in and help them out. They take care of themselves. So I placated my concerns with that idea and kept walking into the community. And after a couple of weeks, something beautiful happened. Stephen's wife had their first child, a beautiful little baby girl named Ruthie. And I felt like this was a good sign, a good omen, because we had some rough luck so far with this project. I'm holding Ruthie in my arms, just inhaling the moment, until Stephen looks me in the eye and says, "We're going to get the school built, right?" And I could feel the desperation in his voice. But I got to be completely candid. I was terrified. People around me were dying. I was pretty sure we weren't going to be able to get that school built. But I knew that Stephen was never going to give up. This guy would not stop, no matter what. All that happened 20 years ago. And I was back in Malawi, completely different part of the country, with a bunch of kids, high school students, to build a school from our program. And we roll into this village, right, in these old bush buses, and hundreds of people come to welcome us. It's overwhelming. Some of the kids are emotional. There's drumming and dancing. They've never experienced this kind of an outpouring. This kid is exuberant. He is not in tears. He is fired up. He is so excited. You know who this is? This is Jimmy Arzu. He made some good choices. He quit the gang. He stayed in school. He got involved in our program, and here he is in Africa, getting ready to help build a school. What are the odds of that? It's to me, it's a miracle. Every time I see it, it's incredible. So Jimmy's exuberant. He's fired up. The celebration goes on for 2 hours, and we finally got to calm everybody down, especially Jimmy, and have a community meeting, right? And we outline, how it's going to work. We asked the villagers to sign a covenant. And everybody there, if you want to build it, everybody's got to sign it. It outlines their commitment to contributing all the unskilled labor to build the school, which is about 1,200 volunteer work days in Malawi. It's a lot. And you got to send your daughters to school in equal numbers with your sons. Same thing as 20 years ago. And they agree, and it takes us 3 hours to sign the covenant, at least, because nobody in the village can actually sign their name. They're completely illiterate. So they have to fingerprint and thumbprint their names to this covenant. But they are proud to do it. And nobody walks away. It's 110 degrees out there. No shade. Nobody walks away. They want to sign that covenant. This woman's name is Felicia. And she proudly signs, thumbprints this covenant. And then she looks up at me and she says, I'm 86 years old. I did not ask her how old she was. But she said, I'm 86 years old. See, I had 11 children. Only 4 of them survived, though. She said, but I got grandchildren. And she said, now I can die in peace, knowing that my grandchildren have a school and a future. That's what she said. And that's what this project means. Education means. And everybody's taking it seriously. Jimmy Arzu signing this covenant. And Jimmy wants to get to know Felicia. So he's like, come on, let's go out to see her. It's like a 30 to 40-minute walk. I'm like, all right, let's do that. We go to visit Felicia. She learns a little bit about Jimmy. And then she says, my youngest daughter actually died during childbirth, but the baby survived. And Jimmy's like, oh, yeah, when was that? And she said, 16 years ago. And Jimmy's like, oh, where's the baby? And she said, sitting right next to you. His name's Alex Bonda, this kid. And Jimmy and Alex had this immediate connection. And Jimmy has this moment of clarity. He's looking up into the sky, literally. He looks up into the sky. And he says, our mothers are up there watching us right now. He said, we got to build this school. We got to stay in school. I mean, he was talking more to himself, I think. He's like, we got to make our mothers proud. Jimmy Arzu made his mother proud. Digging the foundation, hauling cement, mixing concrete, laying the bricks for the walls of a school that would be there for 100 years. Educating generations of children, girls. And we've now built 618 of these schools. But what about Miss Somali Village? What about that first one in Africa? I never closed the loop. Did we get that one built? Actually, we did. It was the most dangerous, difficult project of my life, and maybe builOn's too. And when I left that village, there were 150 kids attending the school. I felt good about it, but I never looked back. I never wanted to go back. Too many crazy things happened. But I'm back, in Malawi 20 years later, and I'm thinking I got to go see what happened. If if the school's even still standing, because we built at the base of a mountain and mudslides, anything can happen. It was a 14-hour trip in a four-wheel drive vehicle to get to that part of the country, the opposite part of the country. When I got to the village, I was completely devastated. I found out that our construction supervisor and his wife and his two little boys all died from AIDS. This guy was a friend. And the chief, he died from AIDS. And the community comes to welcome us, and it's a huge celebration, but my knees are buckled. I can't move. I'm feeling paralyzed. And I can't find my friend Stephen. Where's Stephen? I'm looking around through all these people, and I don't know where Stephen is. 15 minutes go by, and I can't find Stephen. 20 minutes go by, and I don't know where he is. And then he emerged from the crowd, alive, happy, smiling. And I will never forget that moment, because I will never forget what Stephen gave me, what he did for me. In my darkest moments of fear, just raw fear and despair, Stephen gave me the courage to keep going. And then he led me to the center of the village, and I was shocked because I did not know which school we built. Instead of one school and 150 kids, they had 5 schools and 1,000 kids going to school every day, 533 of them girls. It was amazing. We had nothing to do with those other 4 schools. They did that. And then, it's a euphoric moment. I'm standing next to Stephen, and I look over, because I don't know about Ruthie. So many little babies don't make it in Malawi. So I said, how's Ruthie? Is she with us? And he smiled and nodded and introduced me to his beautiful 20-year-old daughter. And he was beaming with pride when he explained that Ruthie attended the school that we built. She went to all 5 of those schools. And then he lowers his voice, he's whispering, he walks up closer to me, and he says, I'm an illiterate man. I can't even sign my own name. But Ruthie, she became a teacher. She's an educator, and she will lift up my family's name forever. That is the power of education. And then he said to me, you are the ignition. There's the word, You started that fire. And I looked at Stephen and I said, no, I didn't start the fire. 20 years ago, you started the fire. You guys built those schools, and now Ruthie is lighting fires. And education is a fire that nobody can put out. And now Jimmy Arzu is lighting fires. Metaphorically, of course, for Jimmy. Is he a statistic? Actually, he is. But now he's part of this number. 94% of the kids that get involved in builOn not only graduate, they go to college. We work with thousands of kids, urban youth, in schools where graduation rates or four-year grad rates are like 50%. Brandeis University did an exhaustive evaluation and drew a causal effect between the programs and improved academic engagement and achievement of the kids. And they pointed to 10 outcomes. It's just service. They serve. What they do is they realize what they can do, what they can change. And bottom line, kids just want to light a fire. There's 85,000 children, parents, and grandparents attending builOn schools around the world every day. Each of them are lighting fires. I learned from Stephen that if we have the courage to confront our fears, we can all lead much, much bigger lives. So you all are here in this moment. You're graduating in a week. You're at this enormous crossroads in your life. You're making these decisions that are going to affect the direction, the trajectory, where you're going to be for the rest of your life. I don't want to stress you out. But as you're making these decisions, think about what you are truly passionate about. Think about what needs to change, what you can contribute, what you can share, whether it's here at Concordia or in Fargo, Moorhead, or somewhere else around the world. Confront your fears if you have them. We all do. And take that step and light that fire. Because what you share, what you contribute, is something that nobody can take away. God bless you all. Thank you so much.
I'll get the ball rolling.
Okay.
Just want to start out. So now I am a finance major. Be graduating in May. He pointed at me. So I'm curious. You studied finance when you were an undergraduate. What made you switch from a field of finance? You were there for 18 months. You said. What made you switch from that to creating a nonprofit?
Well, that's a good question. After college, I worked a couple jobs. I saved as much money as I could, and I bought a backpack and drove my parents crazy and decided to hitchhike around the world for a year. And this is in the 80s. There wasn't a lot of that going on, so they thought I'd completely lost it. And the first developing country I visited was India, and I was completely, we were talking about India at lunch, I was completely overwhelmed by extreme poverty in India. And then I went to Nepal, where they suffer from even more severe poverty in Nepal. And I went to Nepal because I wanted to check out Mount Everest and the Himalayas, right? You know, and so to get to the mountains, you got to walk through the jungle for 10 or 11 days, and then and it was monsoon, so it was raining, and it was just miserable. 18 hours a day of rain. I pull off the trail after like 6 days. I'm drying off, and I look around. You know, I'm peeling leeches off of my legs. You guys ever have leeches? They don't hurt, but they're nasty. And I'm drying off. This little family gave me some tea. I look around, they're celebrating. They're having a party. They're celebrating something. I look outside, and there's like 100 people in the rain just dancing, just having a good time. And you know what they were? They were celebrating the opening of a school. So now I'd seen the oppression and the injustice of extreme poverty, but now I'm seeing the hope and the courage and determination they had around education. And they... I came back, you know, after 3 or 4 more months. I came back to the States, and I saw poverty in America in a much different way, especially in American inner cities. It's insane, you know, the violence, the drugs, just all the different problems that are happening there. But I saw that same thread of hope and courage, especially with our youth, and I wanted to act on it, but I completely chickened out and took a job with GE Capital in finance, which was my dream job. Very difficult to get this position in the financial management program. And my parents were finally like calming down a little bit. And so I was at GE for about 15 or 16 months. And it took me, you know, I just couldn't shake the feeling that I had. I mean, the job was amazing. It was everything I studied and wanted to do. It was challenging. It was competitive. But I had to try and act on these experiences. So I left GE. And I don't know, do you have any follow-up questions?
Not on that.
So that's where everybody thinks there was some light bulb moment. There was none. It took like almost 2 years for it to happen for me, where I realized this is what I needed to do.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who's next? Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm just curious how community and the children get involved with this. Do you seek out kids to help building the schools?
Like Jimmy? Okay, so what we do is we run these intensive programs in urban high schools. And our biggest sort of investment is where we have 2 of our staff embedded in a school 5 days a week, and then working with kids on weekends doing service. And those 2 staff will work with a cohort of teachers implementing a service learning education, a curriculum in the classroom. And then also doing school-wide service projects. Jimmy got roped in through a school-wide service initiative. And as much as he didn't want to, he liked it, so he stayed involved. We also do service every day after school. There's service available for every kid. And then we take a team of 15 to 18 kids at a time overseas to build schools from each school that we work with in the U.S. So it's like an 11-month-a-year program. It's a pretty serious commitment. And we go to schools that are challenged, like I said, where graduation rates are 50 to 60%, and Jimmy's school is pretty good, but the school down the street, graduation rate, 4-year grad rate is only 32%. So we work with what I think are heroic teachers that are really committed and care about the kids, and we just give the kids an opportunity to make change and get out of their way. Good question, yeah. Yes. Yes, that's still the case in most places where we build. Oh, we have translators. We didn't have a translator in that first village, if you can believe it. Technically, the national language in Malawi is technically English because it was a British colony, but very few people in the village speak English. So we had a lot of challenges on top of everything else. But now, so we'll build 115 schools this year, perhaps 130. So we'll break ground on a new one every 3 to 4 days, okay? And we're in Mali, Malawi, Senegal, now Burkina Faso, Nicaragua, Haiti, and Nepal. And we have national teams in all those countries. So Malians in Mali, and the police. So language is not an issue for them. When we bring the kids over to build schools, we'll have 3 or 4 translators in the village the whole time, for the whole 2 weeks while we're there, to translate and help out. When people like me that are terrible with language, ironically, show up, I'll have somebody with me who can help, a translator. Sure. Yeah. Yes. It's a great question. So we keep it extremely simple, and that's why it works. All our schools are still at or above capacity, and we did an extensive audit last year to verify all that. And what we do is we form a partnership, a 3-way partnership between us, the community, which you saw in the covenant process, and the way they have a leadership committee of 6 women and 6 men, and they organize themselves, and then they also help to sustain the school once we build it. And then the other partner is the Ministry of Education. So they provide the teachers. We finish building the school, they bring in the teachers. And there's a lot of incentive for them to do that because they need schools for their teachers. They don't have them. And if they don't fulfill their commitments, we stop building in their region. So it's worked out really well. I mean, it's sort of there's incentive to keep going or leverage, depending on how you look at it. But we've been very fortunate that way, but we keep it very simple. The ministry pays for the teachers, and we build the schools. So what we'll do this year is we're running these programs in 62 urban high schools. We work with approximately 4,000 kids consistently, and we're going to build 115 to 130 schools internationally. And our budget to do all that's about 13 million, a little over 13, including in-kind support. So, and we get, about a third of it from corporations, about 20% from foundations. We run special events, and a lot of individual support and contributors to the cost.
Awesome. And I'm going to interrupt. So apparently this is actually being recorded, so we need everybody
I
to
did not know
respond
that. Whoops.
using the microphone. Yeah, so you're
Oh.
being recorded right now for future
All
use.
right.
So with that in mind, I will be using the microphone from now on. Is there another question?
Okay, so in the process of bring education and with the motivation, because you say that passion is really important, how did you what was the challenges that you had? How did you make it possible to be always motivated? Because as you say, the culture, the language was different, and sometimes people don't really understand the change that you're trying to do. So how did you?
How do I stay? How have I stayed motivated with all the
Ye-
challenges that we
yeah.
faced? It's a good question. Thank you. So I think that the moment when I was most likely to fail and to give up came before we built any schools. It was before that experience in Malawi where we almost died. And I had left GE, and my brother and I decided we were going to try and build 3 schools on 3 continents and then run our after-school programs in 3 high schools. Why we couldn't have just built 1 school in 1 country, I have no idea what was going on in our head. Neither does Dave, but that was our goal. And we formed partnerships and got commitments. I'm going to answer your question, but this story will really tell you where the motivation comes from. So we formed partnerships with Save the Children and Habitat for Humanity International, identified the villages like Miss O'Malley where we would build our first 3. All the others we identified ourselves with our own methodology. We also set up programs in 3 high schools and got a couple hundred kids revved up about being involved in this. And but 6 months after I left GE, we were in the red. We were in big trouble, and we were facing immense rejection. Not only were people, the corporations, the foundations, the individuals, not only were they saying no, they would give us 3 or 4 or 5 reasons why we were going to fail. Generous about that. And the worst part was they were true. They were legitimate reasons. We had no experience building a school. We had no experience mobilizing a community to build a school. We had no experience with youth development. We clearly had no experience fundraising. So we're in trouble, and I'm in a shaky emotional state because it's just like I'm feeling the imminence of failure coming at me, and now the worst part was we got a fax message from Malawi. You guys probably don't know what a fax machine is. We got a fax message from Malawi, and I still remember exactly what it said. It said, today we announced, they weren't supposed to do this. They said, today we announced to the village that you're coming to build the school. They immediately broke out in song and dance, especially the kids, and it went on for hours. And then it said, needless to say, the last line was this, needless to say, if you fail to come, they'll be equally disappointed. The key word was fail. We were failing. And I was in this downward spiral, and I don't often share this part, but I couldn't sleep. I felt now I realized that if we fail, the kids from one of the poorest villages in Africa, as I imagine, as it turned out to be fairly true, would not have a school that they deserved. American youth would once again be disillusioned by empty promises made by adults like me. And I was in a rough place, and I started to really, out of desperation, I think, really open the Bible and look at it. And I would open it up randomly. And I remember one morning at like 3 or something, I couldn't sleep, and I opened up the Bible, and it's just randomly to the Gospel of Mark, and there were 2 sentences. Oh, I gave it away. 2 sentences. Fear is useless. What is needed is trust. And I realized that I was being paralyzed by my own fear, that there was no way this was going to happen, if I was just being crushed. And it was out of desperation, and that actually gave me the courage to do something that I thought, and everybody else I talked to thought was insane. I decided, since I worked at GE, that I was going to call up, and I was a finance guy, I decided I was going to call up the CFO of GE Capital. I never met this guy. I saw him on the cover of the annual report. I saw him once at an assembly. He was down on the stage, and I was up here. This article came out that same year in business. He's a legend, Jim Park. And I'm like, I'm nervous just calling his assistant. I'd really like a meeting with Jim Park. And she's like, well, what's your name? What do you want to meet about? And I told her. And I'm like holding the phone over here because I'm thinking she's going to reject me. And I'm so like hurt and I'm a mess. And all of a sudden I hear Mary say, and you can probably hear her say this too, oh, that sounds nice. How about next Tuesday? And I'm like, really? And I said, yeah, 2 o'clock, I'll be there. I got off the phone before she could change her mind. And I showed up on Tuesday. I was all excited, and then I got to Jim's office. And his office was nearly as big as this room. Not that big, but it was a big office. He's the CFO. And I walk up, and I'm like, oh, my God, my heart starts to pound. I was sure everybody could hear my heart pounding. And I walk in, and I'm nervous, and I'm talking for 20 minutes. Finally, Jim interrupts, and he's like, I like it. What can I do to help? And I said, we need funding. We're in a bad way right now. We cannot build this school without funding. So Jim picked up the phone in that meeting and called the head of the GE Foundation, Dennis Damerman, and got us a meeting. He was also the CFO of GE. And then Jack Welsh stopped in on the meeting. I was in way over my head, clearly. And at the end of the meeting, I didn't know how it went, but they invited us to apply for a grant. And I'm like, oh. I mean, part of me was elated, but part of me is like, we got a stack of rejection letters this thick, from foundations that we've applied to. So I was like, it could be a polite way of saying no. But I was wrong. GE gave us a grant for $25,000. And that definitely didn't solve all our problems, but it was a big start for us. But the significant thing that happened for me was that Jim Park believed in me. And when everybody else thought that we would fail, Jim Park didn't. This guy is trained in risk management. His lights must have been dinging or the lights must have been bright and red and shiny when I walked into his office. But he gave me a chance. And that was a turning point, a big turning point. And to answer your question, it's people like Jim Park that give me the motivation to do what I do and that have done it. And that was the toughest moment for me in my life in terms of this organization. And, it's just amazing what happened from there. I mean, Jim's been on our board now for 22 years. And the current CFO of GE, Jeff Bornstein, is on our board. And the current CFO of GE Capital is on our regional board, Robert Green. Robert goes to Nicaragua to build a school with his boy last summer. FMPs, which is what I was, the finance track. We used to like to think that it was a fast track, the FMPs. FMPs are going out building schools all over the place. The audit staffers, the best and the brightest in the GE finance world, are building schools and doing service alongside our urban youth. And it all started with Jim Park. He changed the culture at GE. It became part of the fabric of the people that were in finance, that are in finance at GE. And now I think it's shifted the paradigm not only at GE, but it's something that could change and shift the paradigm in corporate America. It's something that needs to be emulated. And it's really great to be at a business school because this is the power of an authentic partnership between the for-profit world and the not-for-profit world. People that are investing in, stepping up and doing, being active and involved. Not like passive philanthropy, but partnership, connecting with the community. So, Jim, God bless you. There's no way I'd be here right now. There's no way that there'd be 618 schools built or tens of thousands of urban youth that have been through our programs without your courage, without your vision, without your leadership. Thank you very, very much. Now, what questions do you have for Jim Park? This guy's alum. He's a cobber. I learned about you guys and the cobbers at lunch.
Any other questions, guys?
Isn't that an awesome picture? Did I already take? I have this, so you know who Jim is. I was visiting Jim in Maryland last fall, I think, and he showed me this magazine because I had seen that, but I didn't have a copy. He had no idea what I was going to do with that.
You're right about that.
Hi, right here.
Where? Oh, there you are.
It's on. It's just quiet. Okay. My question basically. So I'm involved in service at Concordia, and so are these two. So we do a big part of trying to get volunteers involved, and we've seen that once you get students involved, they keep coming back, and they really like it. But how exactly do you go about getting students to take the initial step and get involved in service?
It's with the students that we work. First of all, I should tell you and introduce Skylar Badnock, who's from builOn too, and came in this morning. Got up at 4 a.m. to be here. We have a network of chapters in universities around the country, of people that are involved, the students like you that organize, fundraise, and go build schools. And we take you out to live in the village just like we do our students and have the same experience. And so that part of the volunteerism has just been, at this point, it's been contagious and organic and somewhat random. People just want to do it. We're organizing in a much more concerted way around that because I think that this generation, your generation, is going to be the generation to break the cycle of poverty, illiteracy, and low expectations. You guys are special. I've never seen anything like it. So so there's an opportunity to be involved and set up a chapter and go build schools if you want. It costs $30,000 to build a school. But students from all over the country are doing it. From University of Delaware, Michigan State University, my alma mater, Columbia's got a nice chapter, all these chapters. So that's how we engage sort of the university students. But the students in our programs, the urban youth that we work with, we do outreach. We reach out to the kids in the classroom. They get involved in school-wide service projects. They get involved in the classroom and some of the sort of service learning initiatives. So we map out the community, and they help to map it out and tell us what the problems and the issues are, and then they decide how they want to take action. So they own it. They're in the driver's seat, and they get out and start doing service. And when they connect with people, I mean, it's amazing. That's when the magic happens. Like I showed you a picture of this kid who's got learning disabilities, helping an adult who's got developmental disabilities. It's addictive. He feels so good because he's helping somebody else, and he's always been the person on the receiving end. And I can tell you another cool story. In Chicago, this is only not even a month ago. So there's a nursing home where our students would help serve dinner, right, regularly. It's a low-income nursing home, and their budget got slashed. They had no money for the cafeteria. So the elders in this low-income place are going to cook their meals in their kitchenettes in their rooms. And our kids are like, well, what's that's not right. So our kids actually went to our partners. GE is a huge partner, and we work with GE in Chicago. So they talked to some of the GE folks about what was going on. The GE folks had a contest, see who could collect the most food, and then they got a chef to volunteer her time. So they got a chef. The GE people started collecting food. They had this big competition, and then the kids would ideally serve the meals. And it was wild. The GE people collected 1,300 pounds of food in like less than 2 weeks. And I was joking at our board meeting a few weeks ago, the debt collectors won the competition, which made sense. And apparently it's very competitive. They were hiding what they had collected in a cabinet so nobody knew how far ahead they were. It was really funny. But again, and now the GE folks get into it because ultimately, how do you get people hooked? People just want a bigger sense of purpose, a greater sense of purpose and connection. And we help to provide that, then we get out of the way. So the kids love to serve. They want to lead. They want to be part of something bigger. And so do the folks at GE, and so do Deutsche Bank folks, and Ogilvy, and Thomson Reuters. We've got all these great corporate partnerships. It's just, and students here, just once you get them out there, they're hooked. It's just getting them to do it, that first one. Is that helpful, or did I ramble on too long? You got to cut me off eventually. Yeah.
So I am so inspired by the work that you're doing and
Thank you.
your motivation to make systemic change. And I was wondering if you could share some stories of how as students are getting education, what sorts of changes that you're seeing in these communities, both in the United States as well as abroad.
Interesting. So the change in the communities, not so much the students.
Right. So that the education that they're getting is making, what difference is it making in their communities?
I got another story, and then I'll expand on it. So one day, we were doing a big service project. We had 200 kids in the South Bronx, 250 kids. We were celebrating our 20th anniversary. Or was it the 500 school? I think it was both. No, it was the 500 school. We had in the millionth hour of service that our kids did. So we had this big celebration all around the country, all of our schools, all of our cities. Everybody was doing service at the same time. And we had 250 kids in the South Bronx doing service, and a lot of them had their builOn t-shirts on. And we were in a park afterwards doing some team building exercises. And we were broken up into groups of like 5 or 10, and I was hanging out with these kids that I had just met for the first time. One of them was this kid named George. And I don't know George. I'm talking to George. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this woman get off of a bus and come walking across the park. And she's got an attitude. I can just tell. She's angry. Something's not right. And she walks up to me, and she says, I want to know what are all these kids doing in this park? She said, I've been living in this neighborhood for 40 years. I live in that building right over there, and I look over, and that building's half burned down. And she said, I have become afraid of these youth. They are dangerous. What are all these kids doing in my park? And what is builOn? And I was like, whoa. And she said, her name's Mrs. Ferguson. She tells all that. And I'm like, I wouldn't know where to start. But before I could answer, George steps in, this kid who I just met that day. And he tells her about builOn. He tells her about the work that we're doing. And he tells her about the 1 million hours of service that they had contributed. And Mrs. Ferguson, who strikes me as a lady who's never at a loss for words, she didn't know what to say. She looked down for a few minutes, and she looked up at George. And she said, George, I go to church on Sundays. Meaning you should go too. But she said, I'm going to church tomorrow, and I'm going to thank God for you. And I'm going to thank God for all these kids. I'm praying for you. And then she paused again. And she looked up at George right in the eye. She said, I'm not afraid anymore, George, because of you. That's what's happening. I think there is no more profound systemic change than the elimination of fear in our communities. Think about that. George McLeod in the span of a 4-minute conversation, wiped out decades of fear that this woman had of the youth because of the service that he was doing to turn things around. So, we can point to a lot of things. We measure everything, and the hours of service that the kids have contributed, the turnaround in communities. In Detroit, Michigan, we work extensively. There's 40 square miles of abandoned property. And one of our schools, Osborne, is in a really tough neighborhood. And on every block, there's maybe 3 houses that are inhabited and 4 houses that are abandoned and condemned. And at Osborne, there was a problem because there was, I can't remember what the term is, but there was a guy who was hiding out in an abandoned house and raping the kids, the girls, on their way home from school. And the kids wanted to take action and do something about that. So they got the licenses, they started boarding up the houses and painting these positive murals on it so that this guy could no longer, stalker, that was the word I was looking, couldn't stalk them anymore. And it worked. And so, things happen. Fear dissolves, kids take action, they address the issues. I could go on forever, but I won't. So the systemic change we measure in terms of the hours of service that the kids contribute. We can't take credit for improved economic self-sufficiency in these urban neighborhoods. We do measure that in the villages where we build schools because that's a much more controlled environment. But we see decreases in the school. In the schools themselves, kids involved in builOn have 63. Our truancy is down 63% for them. 94% of them graduate and go to college. So kids are coming to school. They're getting out of gangs, and they're staying involved. What else? Systemic. Give me some other. Sure. Well, you saw in Miss O'Malley Village what happens over 20 years. So they built 4 more schools without us. They installed solar. They dug borehole wells. 8 out of 10 of the chiefs in that valley were women. That's the power of education. All of that. They're empowered. We didn't do that. You saw what we did. Almost nothing. They built those schools. And so we also had AED do an evaluation of our work in Malawi and in Mali, and they did this. They produced this report which pointed to substantially improved economic self-sufficiency through microenterprise, dramatically improved gender balance and equity in the community, improved agricultural practices, lower incidences of child mortality because they're taking care of they're educated and they can take care of their kids more effectively. So that report's available. We can get that to you on the website. And then we haven't done any reports. We haven't done any outside evaluations on the systemic impact of our programs on communities, but we have done evaluations of the impact of our programs on the youth in the schools where we work. And that, the Brandeis report, which I referred to, points to 10 different outcomes. So that's an AED report. You should be able to get that on our website, right, Sky? Yeah, okay.
Any other questions?
So, in the Midwest, we sometimes don't talk about things we don't like to see and pretend they're not there. I don't know if you've seen that in other communities.
Oh, I'm from the Midwest.
Okay,
I'm from
all right.
Michigan.
So we have a substantial immigrant population. It's about 10% of our population is new Americans. Many of them are illiterate, and they're having, sometimes 10 people living in an apartment, multiple families living together, and the crime is increasing at an alarming rate. And so if one person wanted to approach a school or approach a government agency about doing something like that, how would they go about doing that? Because my personal experience, I was the complete, absolute ignorant American. I tried to volunteer to teach managing your money to a group of Somalians. And I thought, well, if I just took my American documents and had them translated into Somalian and made handouts on PowerPoint, it would be great. Problem was, not one person in the room was literate in their own language. So for an hour, I stood there thinking, what am I going to do now? I have all of these people, and I can't talk to them because I didn't have a translator, and they were all illiterate, and most of them were women. So, and that's in our community here. So where would you start?
Well, I think with that, in that circumstance, I would try and organize a literacy program. You just start at a little higher level than they're at. So if you go back and you get some volunteers that are really committed and dedicated, and you can get some basic training in running literacy programs, it's not that difficult. You can, go in and maybe 2 or 3 times a week and have 1-hour sessions where you're teaching them how to read and write, how to count, the biggest lesson I think that I've learned is not to try and solve the problems for the communities, but for us, it's just about giving them access to education. And in the process, as long as they have a stake in it, it's like 10 times the effect of just becoming educated, because they're involved in it, they're leading it. So if you can, I would organize some literacy programs for that same population of people. I would ask them what they want to learn as they're learning to read and write, things that are relevant to them and the struggles that they're facing in their communities, and then just do it. Give it a shot. And there's plenty of resources. Skylar can probably steer you to some too, where you can build out some curriculum for these folks. I think that'd be really, really good.
Because I've had a couple of the younger, like teenage girls, and most of the women in this community are not allowed to work.
Yeah.
So what I said is, why don't you do things like making the headdress or the hijab, making that and then selling it to your neighbors. That's not really work outside of the home. And making some of the clothes and selling them to your neighbors and your friends and things, how to sew. And one girl actually is making a lot of money doing that.
Awesome.
Just by the thinking, I do know how to sew. I could
Yeah.
do this and it wouldn't count as work.
And that could be part of your curriculum. I mean, what I just shared with you is not really an original idea of mine. We actually run literacy classes in developing countries in these villages where, like, Francelina, she can't read or write, So in these villages, we have between 4,000 and 5,000 adult, parents and grandparents learning how to read and write at nighttime, and we have a curriculum built out around it where we train locally literate people how to teach, and then they teach and they build out the curriculum based on what's relevant in the village, whether it's improved agriculture or animal husbandry or sanitation, health, prenatal care, child care. The most popular is clearly microenterprise. Some folks make soap, shea butter, and things like that, take it to market, and they open bank accounts. It's really cool. And the same thing can happen here. It's really just, be there for them consistently, but let them lead, let them tell you what they want to learn.
That's great advice.
And then they'll take it from there. Yeah, I hope, it'll be. You had the answer all the time,
No,
I think.
I have fear.
Well, we all do. We all do. Very cool.
Any other questions? Professor Coach. No?
Volunteered,
Thank
Hannah.
you. So you touched a little bit upon, the locations that you're at building the schools. And I'm guessing that with the volume of schools as it's increased, it's become, word has spread about this maybe a bit in the countries. But how specifically do you pick the locations of where to start building the new schools at? Do you look at, I know the United Nations online has got some really cool, capabilities where you can see where aid is needed most, or what areas of developing countries that there aren't schools
Yep.
located in. So how do you go about the planning of location-wise where to pick
Where
the
to build?
program? Yeah, where to
Sure.
build.
Like which countries or which villages?
Maybe both, or whatever
Both?
you deem
Okay,
is the
so-
most appropriate answer.
Sure,
But I'm just
well-
curious on how you pick those locations.
So in terms of identifying countries where we work, where we're going to work, we just broke ground on our first school ever in Burkina Faso. And Burkina qualified because they are the economically fourth poorest country on the planet. And, there is a causal relationship between extreme poverty and illiteracy. Some folks argue that illiteracy drives extreme poverty. Others argue that extreme poverty drives illiteracy. Who cares? It's a real issue, and education is a real solution. So there's a need. We look first at the need. We try to find governments that are relatively stable, though that's not easy, and where we can partner with the ministries of education to provide the teachers. Then we go into the communities, and we look at villages in the more remote areas where they need a school, where they want a school, and where they're willing to build the school. And over a series, like maybe 6 months or so, 3 to 6 months, we'll visit the community. Well, the first step would be to organize a leadership committee of 6 women and 6 men, and then for you to build out a plan for mobilizing the villagers to contribute the labor to build the school. And then we also ask them to collect locally available materials, sand, aggregate, whatever they have, because we want them to have as much of a stake in it as they possibly can. Sometimes they got nothing, and that's okay, as long as they're willing to contribute the labor. So that'll take place over 3 or 4 visits to the community. We'll spend the night in the village. Our staff, once we initiate the project, our construction supervisor and skilled labor live in the village with a host family in a mud hut for the duration of the project. We don't leave till the school's finished. But that part's the easiest part. Identifying the village, doing a good job identifying the right village is the most important thing. You do that, and then it's really smooth and easy to build the school. We can build the school in 10 to 12 weeks. So, it starts with the need. And then we look at stability. We look at the partnerships with the Ministry of Education. Most importantly, we reach out to the communities and really assess whether they're willing to build the schools. Plus, we got funding for Burkina. You got to have funding. It's ironic. We have anybody here know who Catherine McPhee is? I never heard of her. She's a big funder. She's wonderful. I met her now. I know who she is, but she funded our first school in Burkina Faso. We have another famous person who I knew the name, but I didn't recognize her when I met her. She funded 10 schools in Malawi and is funding our first ever secondary school in Mali, which is a big project. So she's about $750,000 into builOn. It's Madonna. Isn't that funny? It's really good. Yes?
A quick question. As part of a capitalist economy where self-interest is valued
Yep.
historically, and where,
Yeah.
I guess trickle-down economics is glorified, what is in it for you?
For me, personally?
Yeah.
Same thing that's in it for you. Same thing that's in it for Jim Park. Same thing that's in it for you. I derive a very strong sense of purpose from this work. I love it. We were talking, Teresa and I were talking yesterday. I was like, I can't believe I get to do this for my job. And
Doesn't make economic sense.
I'm not making the money I would have made at GE, but there's no guarantees I'd still be at GE. It's a very competitive place, but no, it makes fine economic sense. I haven't made any, like for the first 3 years, no salaries, and then I'm out of savings, and so took a per diem and then a small salary, but now I got 2 kids, and one of them has very serious special needs, and I'm married, and so we got a house, and so I take I have a good salary, I think I'm overpaid actually. Jim and I have this conversation sometimes because he's in charge of our finance committee. But no, I mean, it's fun. I live a good upper middle class life. I like no complaints at all. And people sometimes talk about the sacrifices. I didn't always live in the I lived in a half boarded up brownstone for 3 years in Harlem. Not because I didn't have the money for a better place, but because I needed to learn from the community how to really develop meaningful after school programs for urban youth. I'm a kid from a small town in Michigan. What do I know about urban issues? But, you know, for the first 10 or 12 years, it was tougher for me in a lot of ways. But I still, you know, I made no real sacrifices in my view, because I've made the choice to do everything that I do, and I love doing it. I wouldn't rather be doing anything else. So there's, I don't know. It's like there's nothing special about that. And there's no, for me, I don't think there's any real sacrifice. I don't know. It's good. It's great. And I get to come to places like this. This is awesome.
Excellent. And we have time for one more question. Looks like it's going to Dr. Duffrey.
There's a lot of Catholic theology in your book.
Yeah, I'm a Catholic.
So it looks like, and a lot of New Testament stuff.
Yeah.
So it seems to me evident that faith is a big driver in your life.
It is. You know, and, well, what's the question? I don't want to just ramble.
I just want you to comment on that.
On faith? Yeah, it's interesting. And it's funny that after Jim read the book, I was nervous because he was one of the first people that I let read the galley. And I was like, well, what'd you think? Any surprises? And he goes, he didn't know about that part. I was so private about my faith up until we wrote the book. And I was reluctant to talk about my faith in the book. Because I'm like there's the Catholics, we have St. Francis of Assisi, and he once said, you know, go out and preach the good news, but only use words if you have to. That's the kind of thing I'm into. So I've never been, my brother Pete is very evangelical, and it works for him, and that's very cool, but that's just not what I'm wired for. So as my co-writer and my agent and my editor and I are trying to figure out how to link it all together, they kept asking me, what got you? What kept you going? You know, what motivated you? And ultimately, it was my faith. It rescued me in my moments. You know, and God guides us. And I was never comfortable talking about it before, but I had to get comfortable with it. And I felt like, in some ways, had a responsibility to not just acknowledge it, but share, you know, what it is and how it is. I'm very much a believer in liberation theology and social justice. I'm super thrilled with our new Pope. Wow. I mean, this guy is phenomenal. But I also know that there are a lot of problems with the Catholic Church. And as my dad used to say, yeah, he was a very devout Catholic. He used to say, you know, there is no perfect institution. You know, and he said that, do you agree with everything I say to me? And I said, no. He said, but I'm still your father, and you still love me, right? And I said, yeah, that's the way it is with a church. You don't have to agree with everything, but you're part of a community. So, you know, and I talked about that moment where my faith really kind of rescued me, that dark moment in the middle of the night. And I'm really, really inspired by, you know, the strength that you can get from God. Not just the Christian, you know, the Dalai Lama has really been influential for me, and Mother Teresa, and I'm reading a great book. I've read 4 books by Thomas Merton now, but I never read his autobiography, 7-Story Mountain. It's like 600 pages. And he's only like 30 when he writes it. So I'm like, what's he going to write? You know, it is so good. But he's very liberal and very progressive and really right on in my view. So I get a lot of ideas from those folks. Dorothy Day too. She's good. I don't know. Did that answer? Was that what you wanted?
Yeah, it did. Thanks.
And then the first media piece I had to do around the book was for PBS, and it was a show called Religion and Ethics. Bob Abernathy was the guy that did the interview. It was a long interview, and it was going to be about religion. I was so nervous, but you'll see a part in there, too, in the book where, where my dad was tremendously influential in imparting his faith. Yeah. Jonah, did you have a question or no?
Yeah, I don't know if there's time.
Go for it.
Well, I guess I had a question, but I can just do a comment.
Whatever you want.
I guess, have you met Dr. Paul Farmer?
No, I like that guy. He's a hero. I'd love to meet him sometime. He's that's generous for me. He's a phenomenal guy. I'm not. Oh yeah, that's right. Did you read Mountains Beyond Mountains?
I haven't read the whole thing. I've been busy.
It's very good.
Yeah, so and he's starting to talk more about his faith and a lot more.
Is he? He is now, Farmer?
I mean, he does a little more.
Oh, that's good.
For quite a while, he was
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's doing incredible work. Somebody asked me once, who do I really respect in the NGO community? And this is a woman who she's seen it all. And we were in a truck in Africa for like 10 hours. And it took me almost 10 hours to decide who it is I really respected most. And Paul Farmer's who I came, Mother Teresa, Paul Farmer. But that guy, I just really admire his approach. He gets out there, he walks the walk. He's laid it on the line, and he goes to the toughest areas and works. It's amazing. I'd love to meet him sometime. That'd be great.
It's really interesting. There's a project we just started a couple days ago called the 30-30 Project, and it's actually working on building a hospital in Malawi.
With partners?
Partners is helping it, but it's actually the celebrity Mackmore and Ryan Lewis. It's Ryan Lewis's mom who started it, and it's really interesting.
Do you know what part of Malawi it's in? Because we're teaming up with partners in a new district there in Malawi. What is the name of that district, Scott? Nano. Yeah, I went right through it, but I couldn't think of the name of it. The Nano district. We're teaming up with partners. It's good folks.
Excellent. Well, I'd just like to thank both you, Jim and Jim Park, for both your leadership and your vision being here with us today. I think a lot of Concordia students are searching for that sense of purpose that has been brought up quite a lot here, and we appreciate you telling your story and
Thank you very
and
much.
letting us in on that.
I really am grateful, and Jim is my hero. He's been the most influential person in my career by a long shot, and has guided me in so many ways. And when that crisis hit in 2008, the first person I called was Jim Park, and he helped to guide us, because he's a financial genius, and so he helped to really guide us and make sure that the organization was strong, and we were. We were growing in double digits by, and we flattened out in 2009 just to be careful, but by 2010 we were back into double-digit growth. And that's just the beginning of it, Jim. You gave me the confidence to keep going when I needed it, and I am just incredibly grateful. No way I can describe it in words. Can I have a hug?
There we go.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, both of you. And if you have not gotten your book yet, there are still plenty of
Oh,
copies
thanks,
in the
Jim,
back.
for the books, you guys.